Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kerzner.
Hello and welcome to episode 37 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kerzner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now, and I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this amazing present moment. The title and topic for episode 37 is Why Be Present? It's an important question. Why should you be present? What's the whole point of this? And, if you've listened from the very beginning, you would have heard over and over again of the importance of being present, and you would have also been supplied with a number of tools, reflection points, and perceptions and perspectives. But I think it's a good time to maybe rehash some old information and provide some new insight. When I first start working with patients, with clients, and I'm able to identify a lack of presence as being one of their core issues, and it's just to what degree, really, because the heart of almost all of our emotional challenges, life challenges, there's a layer of presence or lack of presence within it, built into it. And you can measure a person's self-inflicted suffering versus their enjoyment based on how present they are in that moment. So when I first introduce presence, I like to share a little bit about my viewpoints, but one of the more important topics when it comes to presence is that it's a process. Presence isn't something that you can buy. It's not something that could be given or easily obtained. It has to be earned. And when you first start on this voyage of learning how to be more present and then being present, it's important that you pace yourself. There's no rush. So when you're first starting to think about being mindful or present, it's really important that you put things into perspective, understand that there's going to be moments that you're going to be successful at it and moments that you're not. But what is presence? That's a really good question as well. Presence is a state of being present in the moment. But really, what is, if we're going to go deeper, what does it mean to be present in the moment? Being present in the moment means that you're existing without being dominated by your thought space, specifically about thoughts of the past or worries of the future, that you're not allowing your analytical mind to try to break down and understand everything that's happening to you or around you or about you, whatever it is. Being present is about accepting each and every moment without labeling that moment, without analyzing that moment. Basically, you have to get into this state of acceptance and really act as if you've asked for it, that it is for your greatest good. And people would say, well, what about the moments that don't feel good? What about the moments that there's a lot of suffering? And of course, there are exceptions to every rule. There are extreme outliers. But overall, the challenges that exist within our life, the experiences that we have, the lessons that we learn, they're all for our greatest good. So it's best to accept the challenges that are hard as well as the challenges that are easy. And by doing this, you're starting your foundation. You're building a foundation for mindfulness. You're building a foundation for presence. And within this foundation lies all of the tools and methodologies that you can use throughout your day to pull yourself back to the present moment. Without being present, it's so easy to become lost in thought because your mind is constantly firing up these thoughts, your ego as well. And these thoughts, more often than not, have nothing to do with the present moment. Because what your mind's trying to do is it's trying to create or elicit an emotional response, an emotion, which then in turn triggers more thought. And, I know that I'm really summarizing a whole process that can be really complicated by saying it the way I just did, but to be present means that we also have to remember to simplify. So looking at that cycle of thought and emotion, you easily become dominated and you're the victim of your thoughts. Now, most people walk around and are thought dominated and are completely associated and tied into that thought stream. But that thought stream has nothing to do with the present moment. And so people get trapped, they get stuck. And instead of living, really in the moment, they're always living for another moment. And that's a travesty, but it's also just a waste of time. So how do we change this? How do we stop being so thought dominated? There's one question. There's one question that you need to ask yourself 1,000,000 times a day in the beginning. Am I being present? Does this thought have anything to do with the present moment, to these emotions, whatever? But am I being present? Because once you start challenging each thought, then you can become the observer of each thought, of your thoughts. And once you become the observer of your thoughts, you're no longer the victim of your thoughts. And this is a really important step. It's vital, actually, in learning how to be present is, taking a much different stance at the thoughts that are popping around your head. One analogy that I like to share is, you have to look at all your thoughts as clouds in the sky. You have to let them float by. You can't be overly attached. You can't grab onto them. You just have to say what they are, acknowledge them, and let them go. And you're going to have an opportunity to practice this 1,000,000 times a day, literally. Especially in the beginning when you're just always constantly thinking. There's just racing thoughts, random thoughts, however you want to label them, but they're thoughts. And in order to gain presence, you have to be vigilant, persistent, and consistent in this specific exercise. You have to ask yourself over and over and over again, does this have anything to do with the present moment? Am I being present? However you want to phrase that question to yourself. And slowly, you'll start seeing how many thoughts are popping up into your head and how little they have to do with the present moment. They just want to pull you in every other direction. They want to make you think about the past, whether that's a good or a bad thought. They want to make you think about the future. And in the end of the day, the past and the future are just really mental constructs. They're not real. They don't exist anywhere but in your head. And it's not that it's not real to you, it's just not real to anyone else. And so you are creating a present moment based on mental constructs that aren't even accurate. The only way that your past perspective could be accurate or objective is if there was a film crew following you around, because then we could all sit down and watch it and say, oh, okay, that's exactly what happened. But instead we pull these memories from the past based on a current filter, a current emotional filter. And then, then we have these either rose-colored glasses of the past or, we have a terrible experience from past memories, whatever it is. But then you create a future based on these past memories, future that hasn't even happened yet. So that seems like a really bad way to live your life, but it's actually really common. And we have to break this cycle, and we do that again by being the observer of our thoughts. Because once you start seeing your thoughts for what they are, you're going to either find it really funny or you're going to be able to discount it. Or however you feel, it doesn't matter, because you're just going to learn how to accept it for what it is and learn how to detach a little bit, or a lot, really, because you don't want to be the victim of your thoughts or your ego. No one wants to be a victim anyway. But the funny thing is that, we live in an amazing time with incredible opportunity and very little existential threat at least here, in the United States. I don't speak for everyone. I want to be really clear here, but for most of us, we live in a time where we have no physical threat, yet we create our own threat within us. It's amazing that the safety and security that exists without cannot be mirrored within. But we have an ego, and the ego loves to serve itself. And so what the ego does is it's actually firing up those thoughts that want to trigger emotions. And a good analogy, now that I'm talking a little bit about the ego, is that a good analogy that I like to provide is that the ego is like a 3 or 4-year-old child that's just crying and screaming. The best way to deal with a child like that is not to yell and scream at them. That only escalates the situation or makes it worse. You have to kind of let them get that energy out. So the best thing to do with the ego is just let it, burn itself out by acknowledging its presence, but not by listening to it, not by being dominated by it. And, the ego identification, those are really good things to start delving into a little bit so you can understand your mind. Not that you should, really have to understand it in a very specific or singular way, but just have a very broad overview. And I actually posted an article on ego identification on my website, on my acupuncture website, sorry. So if anyone's interested, please shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to post that. But again, presence, and why should you be present? I've never really had anyone ask me that question. I think it's always been implied that, or at least the way I present it, is that presence is so important that there's no question about it, like why should you be present? It's why am I not being present? But presence allows for clarity and acceptance and more accurate depiction. Because when you're not present, it's really hard to see things, to see people, places, and things for how they are, who they are, and where they are. You enter into this state of judgment. How hard do we work on not being judgmental? But it's really hard not to be judgmental when clarity is just not a part of your reality because you're not being present. So, the goal really in life is to navigate your way through the peaks and valleys and make the best decisions you possibly can. Now, the only way to make the best decisions and choices, selections, is through clarity, and that is obtained through presence. So, as you're getting more and more present, you're going to start seeing things for actually how it is, not for how you perceive it to be. And that's, when the haze starts clearing in your life, there's a lot of honesty that takes place. Because, you no longer want to or even can shift blame of the things that are happening to anyone else, because blame is inconsequential. Presence is all about acceptance. So a lot of the things that have taken place, you have to accept. You have to accept your role in it. You have to accept the fact that there's nothing that you can do about it, and then you have to shift away from that into the present moment. And that shift, is so important, that it's a shift in perception in the way that you're seeing the world. Your world, specifically, internal and external, is a direct reflection on your emotional state, which is a direct reflection on either of your lack of presence or your being full of presence. And so I just keep on bringing it back to that fact that there's a lot of satisfaction and relief derived from really placing effort into letting go of the past and stop worrying about the future and just being where you're at. It really is. And, the truth behind all this is that the present moment is the only thing that is real. And I'll just repeat that again. The present moment is the only thing that's real. It's the only thing that's tangible. You can feel, you can taste, you can touch, you can listen. That's it. It all happens in the present moment. So if that's the case, then why are you not making that present moment the best it can be? Now, I'm not saying, that you're going to be able to make each present moment amazing. I'm just saying that you want to do your best, and however that is at that point in that moment, because that present moment will fade away and a new present moment will appear. And that's where that state of acceptance comes in, because you just get into an allowance that there's shifting. Everything is constantly changing. Nothing is staying the same. Each present moment affords opportunity for change and growth, and then a shift because a new present moment shows up. So, that opportunity cannot be seen without clarity, and that clarity cannot be obtained without presence. So I think I've done a really good job of answering that question, why be present? It's so important because it's the root of everything. You can't be mindful without being present. You cannot really enjoy life if you're constantly being dominated by your ego, by your thought space, and we all experience that. The difference is that some people are actively trying to change that, and there are other people who accept it and are dominated by it. The question for you is, where do you lie in that? How awakened are you to your thought process? How ready are you to be the observer of your thoughts? All great questions, all very subjective. So there it all is. I hope that all of you listening will have taken away something important from this podcast and from really all the other podcasts. I speak specifically on presence because that's how important I think it is. And I know within my own reality, as well as the realities of the patients that I work with, that learning how to shift into the present moment is quite possibly the most important piece of information that anyone could ever provide you. It's the most important exercise that anyone could ever do with you. It's the most important exercise that you can ever do for yourself. So ask yourself that question, am I being present? You can ask yourself, does this thought have anything to do with the present moment? Anything specific about presence, but just keep asking yourself that over and over again. So I want to thank everyone for listening, and I want to welcome you back to the present moment.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.